Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a truly monumental milestone, the United States Semiquincentennial. Yeah, I know, it's a massive word. Basically, it just means the nation's 250th anniversary. It's a huge moment, one that really invites us to look back at 2.5 centuries of history, evolution, and, some deep reflection. We're going to explore how a humble startup of just 13 colonies managed to evolve into a literal global superpower. And we'll take a hard look at where the country actually stands today, in the year 2026.
So here's our roadmap for the next few minutes. We'll start with the 250th anniversary milestone, then move on to from colonies to global power. After that, the rise of an economic giant, a look at the American dream today, and finally, a politically charged holiday. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The 250th Anniversary Milestone. Okay, so just pause for a second and think about the sheer weight of that number. 250 years. It's actually staggering. When the United States declared independence from the British Empire back in 1776, it was really just this fragile, kind of scrappy coalition of 13 eastern seaboard colonies. And honestly, it is incredibly rare for any republic to maintain a continuous, evolving form of government over such a massive stretch of time. I mean, think about what this nation has actually endured to get here, surviving a devastating civil war, fighting in immense global conflicts, and going through massive internal transformations across generations. It totally begs the question, right? How do they manage to pull this off?
Well, that brings us to Section 2, from colonies to global power.
To really understand the nation today, we have to look at how it physically grew across the continent. Because how did those original 13 colonies actually get the resources and the space to survive for 2,500 years? The physical expansion of the U.S. was, well, it was rapid and relentless. Following independence in 1776, the borders pushed past the Proclamation Line, right to the Mississippi River. And the momentum, it only sped up from there. In 1803, the Louisiana Purchase literally doubled the country's territory overnight. It was this massive land deal that completely altered the nation's trajectory. Then, between 1845 and 1860, aggressive expansion pushed deep into the Southwest. And by 1898, the U.S. started looking outward, beginning its overseas expansion and moving beyond the North American continent entirely.
Now, these weren't just lines shifting on a map. They were highly strategic moves that totally secured the nation's future. For instance, securing the Oregon Country finally gave the U.S. vital access to the Pacific Ocean, which opened up entirely new trade possibilities. Then, the annexation of the Republic of Texas in 1845 directly led to a war with Mexico. The result? The U.S. gained the northern half of Mexico's territory, including what is now incredibly lucrative California. And let's not forget 1867, when the U.S. actually purchased Alaska from the Russian Empire. Put all this together, and these acquisitions secured 2 vast coastlines, millions of acres of land, and just immense untapped natural resources.
Which leads right into Section 3, rise of an economic giant.
So all of that unprecedented physical expansion, it laid the absolute groundwork for an industrial powerhouse. This territorial growth fundamentally rewired the nation. See, initially, the early United States was an agricultural economy. It was deeply reliant on farming and, crucially, heavily entangled with the institution of slavery in the South. But as those borders expanded and all those natural resources were unlocked, the economy transformed. Railroads connected the coasts, factories multiplied, and the U.S. basically ignited a technological boom that ultimately pushed the nation to global economic supremacy. It was a complete structural shift, from agrarian roots to this sprawling industrial machine.
But here's the thing. This historical economic engine didn't just produce money. It produced a mindset. This vast wealth creation set the stage for a totally unique national ethos. But, economics is really just data until we introduce the human element. The real question we have to ask ourselves here is, who actually reaped the benefits of this staggering wealth? And what did it mean for the people living there?
That brings us to Section 4, the American dream today.
Let's take a look at the modern reality of the country's most famous promise right on its 250th birthday. Here's our definition, the core metric we're going to use to evaluate the nation's success today. The American dream, the promise that anyone, regardless of where they were born or what class they were born into, can achieve prosperity, wealth, and freedom through hard work. It's a beautiful, incredibly powerful concept, but does it actually hold up in 2026?
To explore that, let's look at a pretty compelling real-world example from our sources. Take the story of Dr. Sheila Nazarian. Her family fled the Mullah regime in Iran in the 1970s, and they arrived in the U.S. with absolutely nothing. But through immense hard work and sheer determination, she became a highly successful plastic surgeon in Beverly Hills. So for her, the promise is completely real. She points to her own upward mobility as undeniable proof of the American dream, basically saying, "Show me a country that is better."
However, as our sources point out, we really have to juxtapose that perspective with others to get the full picture. Journalist Rike Harvitz takes a sharply different view. She argues, quote, "The American dream was always a lie." And historian Nell Painter reminds us that for marginalized groups, every step forward provoked fierce resistance. They're pointing out the historical realities and deep systemic inequalities, basically noting that true equality and freedom for everyone hasn't just naturally occurred. It has required constant and often really painful struggles. And looking at the realities of 2026, reaching that absolute upper league of success often requires extreme wealth and status symbols. We're talking luxury villas in Beverly Hills, Porsches, Rolexes, Gucci fashion, and, as some sources point out, even the social necessity of finding the quote-unquote right partner. But look, these aren't just superficial items. They represent a widening structural wealth gap. The sheer cost of this top-tier lifestyle really highlights an incredible distance between the very bottom and the very top of society today. And when economic disparity becomes this immense, well, it naturally breeds political friction.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, a politically charged holiday. Let's bring our timeline right up to July 2026 to look at the current atmosphere. Our sources map out this truly striking contrast on the ground today. On one hand, you have the official 2026 Semiquincentennial celebrations. These are events designed to project a unified national pride, honoring the founders and the flag. But right alongside that, you have the reality of an intensely polarized political landscape. The sources highlight the significant presence of Donald Trump and the MAGA movement, noting how they actively challenge traditional government institutions. It is a stark side-by-side. Essentially, a birthday party for a unified nation taking place in a highly divided political reality.
Looking at the historical context alongside this current data, it's pretty clear. America at 250 is not a country resting on its laurels. It is actively wrestling with its own contradictions. The institutions that were designed 250 years ago, they're currently undergoing severe stress tests as the country debates its core identity, its values, and its future direction. Which leaves us with a final, really powerful question. 250 years of freedom, but who does it truly apply to today? Does the American dream apply equally to everyone, or is it reserved for a privileged few? As the United States marks this monumental semi-quincentennial, it's a question the nation is still fiercely trying to answer. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this look at the data and history has sparked your curiosity to explore this fascinating topic even further.